Hi, folks. I guess it's kind of evening for people who have joined from India, right? And it is a working day, so it must be hectic for you folks, right, to join. So I will try to make it little bit more related to the latest tech stacks rather than the old repetitive one, right? And I will try to help you in some way so that it will add value in maybe in your next interview preparation or maybe into your next um, exploration of new technology that is going on in the market. uh, Usually that I do on LinkedIn, right? Okay, so before I start, I want to make sure that the agenda is pretty clear for everyone, right? So that you will not feel lost in between, or you may feel like, okay, this content is not relevant to me. Okay, I've just created a small section over here using our mind map to make sure that you folks are aware of it, of the structure that we are going to discuss in the coming 30 minutes, right? First, I will walk you through to the introduction. This is the most important part where you should pay attention, because I will discuss about how shift left is going on around. This is the buzzword, right, folks? Everybody heard about it a lot. I will put it in a more technical way. Okay, that's what I try to do on my post also, right? So I will put shift left in a very technical way, and then I will tell you like what are the challenges we face these days in product testing, right? And what are the main problem statement around it, how we face problem with test environment setup, or maybe playing around with test data or generating test data, though LLM is there, but still it's a pain point, right? And then we will talk about solution. In the solution, there are many options, and one of the options that we have decided to show is using our hypertest SDK. So there you will show a little bit of demo, and I know after the demo you definitely want to give it a try, right? So that you can create a POC or maybe whatever you want to play around it. So the steps will be provided over here, how to practice and all. And Hypertest team also help you to do the setup. So it's not like after this session it's just 30 minutes and you waste your time. It's like you will get further support, okay, to set it up on your machine, right? And definitely you can show it on your resume maybe, right? Okay, cool, folks. Let's start. How many folks has already joined? Can
I
we have a
think
cross
about
check?
25. 25. I think about 25.
Cool.
Right.
Just folks, just give me 2 minutes. I just want to share with some other folks in one of the group, because I just copy pasted in some group. Just give me a minute.
So that we just don't feel lost, Sidharth, we just introduce ourselves. Everybody knows Sidharth, and obviously that's one of the reasons why people would have joined here. I'm very excited to be part of this webinar. My name is Shailendra. I'm the founder at Hypertest, and I have with me my colleague Ushnanshu, who in later part of the webinar would be helping you understand how to get started with Hypertest. Thanks for getting on this webinar, Siddharth. I am very hopeful that this could be very useful for our attendees.
Yep. Yep. Hope so, folks, right?
Right.
Yeah, we will definitely give justice for this 30 minutes, okay? Okay, cool. Let's start, right? So first, I want to throw you two buzzwords. I want to clarify it in the most technical way. Okay. First is shift left testing, and what is the and what is end-to-end testing in product level, right? So now we heard about that. Okay, shift left strategy is going on everywhere. We have to start testing before the testing phase, or maybe traditionally how the testing happens at the end, just before a product is released. But with shift left testing we will try to do it earlier. But what do we mean by earlier, right? So let me put it in very clear way how basically a software lifecycle works, right? Give me a minute. So basically what happens, first we get a requirement, right? That we get it in BRD, business requirement document, right? Then we do a design document, right? Design doc, correct? After the design doc we work on the HLD LLD, right? Then it goes for the development phase. After that it comes the testing, and then we go for the release, the best possible ways, right? So how it starts: BRD, design doc, HLD LLD, development, testing. So in normal testing phase, what we do, we enter in the fifth line when the testing starts. What shift left is saying that, okay, quality is required in every phase. So why we are waiting until the fifth step? Because the major things are done by the fourth step. So why we are waiting for the fifth step, the problem to occur, and then we will try to solve the problem, right? So what they do, they say that, look, man. So I'm telling it from my experience, folks. Okay, nothing theory, nothing. Okay, what I do. So they ask us that, look, you try to understand the feature. You try to understand the customer problem, then go through the BRT, figure out what better we can do to provide better quality to customer, right? That's why testing will start from BRD. When the BRD is written, so BRD usually will be given by the business team, or in your case, maybe a business analyst will write the BRD. So why not a QA will go through the BRD and make sure that, okay, this areas I can see there will be a problem, right? So you will be involved in BRD. Then when it comes to design doc, you will again get involved. Do they consider how the testing environment will be set up? Do they consider who will own it? Do they consider how the release pipeline will be part of the automation cycle? How they will integrate our automation into the release pipeline? Do they put a quality check over there? Those are the things will be decided in design doc. When we go to HLD NLD, make sure whenever they have designed, are they considered localization part? Do they consider doing cross browser testing, right? So testers knows those things, right? Dev knows, but sometimes they miss because they have a lot of other things to look after, right? That's why the SDET roles are in big demand these days, because they know all those things. They know quality side also and tech side also, right? So if you have a kind of passion to be a SDET also, you should look into these things, right? And there, once the HLD already done, development start. Now you may say that, okay, what I will do as a QA and developer? Pitch in, look into the unit test, what they are writing, right? Pitch into the integration test, look what they are writing. They may miss some important scenarios, right? There are a lot of tools like Jacoco, SonarCube. Try to integrate it into your pipeline, right? So before you come to your testing stage, your 80% things are done, right? So the product you get is already properly tested. Now, this in entire cycle, there are two problems which always arises. Playing around with test environment, who will own this? The DevOps team will own this, the dev will own this, the QA will own this. There is always a problem, right? Because that's the overhead, right? Who will take the ownership? Who will deal with those QA environment? After the dev deployment happens, the normal unit test pass, who will deploy it into the QA environment? Is it like automated Jenkins pipeline or AWS code pipeline we set up? If we set up also, if the deployment fails, who will fix it? Who will go through the logs? So the ownership part little bit creates problem, right? And the another problem that we face is test data. So now we may say that, okay, there are a lot of tools to generate test data, but practically speaking, in complex products, the data cannot be generated randomly. So just to give you an instance, you are testing maybe a website, maybe Flipkart, Myntra, or Amazon, anything, right? And you are trying to check a item, right? There is an item ID associated with every item. You cannot just generate a random alphanumeric value, correct? But because that's
Mhm.
not an item. So how you will test it? So you need to have an item which has a detail listing about it, which has a price, right? When somebody try to increase the quantity, your offer should be applied. All those things are there. That's why no matter how much the test tools are being generated, uh, still we have these gaps somewhere, right? And this is what our problem statement talks about. So if you have seen the document, I'm going to share this document, folks, right? But I don't want to make it in a way like it would be so much theory. That's why I'm explaining everything with proper example. So this is the problem statement that I have just explained you. I have put it in a more tech terms over here, right? So now there are multiple ways to solve this problem. Okay, there are multiple ways to solve it. Maybe you may say that, okay, I will give it to DevOps folks, or I will completely automate the pipeline, right, to avoid test environment. But there is one more approach which basically SDET also does it a lot. That I will do the setup in my local machine. I will run it and I will make sure everything is fine before even I will deploy it. So in that case, what the benefit you will get? You will have a quick feedback flow with your dev, right? You can immediately give the, you do not have to wait the deployment happens and then QA environment is up, then I will go and test, right? Instead of that, just do the setup in your local machine, test it, and make sure that, okay, everything works fine. Then it will go to the deployment phase into QA, and automatically your automation suite will be triggered, right? So that will give you a more advantage on how you are performing testing in the little bit earlier phases. And looking for the test data, there is one popular solution in test data is like, go through your production database, okay, figure out some data which can be used for testing, which is not always be a viable option, but at least you will get some data which is testable rather than generating random alphanumeric values which is of no use, right? So what we do, we render around the database. One solution is render around the database and figure out which set of data can be fetch and use for testing, right? But that's not an easy task to go through your DB, fetch, hit a query at runtime, and then and query execution will take time, right? It will take time to fetch the data, and then you check, okay, this data it can be used. So kind of to solve this problem, there are many organizations working on it. And when I talked to Shailendra today afternoon, I was discussing the same point, that how we are going to solve this problem. And he has given a very good point over there, right? So it's not about how we are, which tool, which solution we are trying. It is what approach we are taking, right? And that approach, in that approach, if hypertest is fitting into, then it's very good for us, right? So in this session, that's why I try to tell you that, okay, initially I will explain you folks what happens around shift left, how the software lifecycle works, where exactly the problem statement lies, and what are the possible solution. So one of the prominent solution is by the hypertest, which Ushanshu will take over and show you a demo, right? And meanwhile, what we can do, when Ushanshu will show you that how basically it works, how it generates test data by looking into your production data, and how basically it helps you to do the setup in your local machine and run your test cases rather than depending on the QA environment deployment setup. I will then jump after this demo. I will jump in and I will tell you a little bit of conclusion, like how you can approach for it and how you can give it a try without paying any amount, at least initially, right? Salendra has promised that he is going to give a 1 month free setup for everybody who has joined, and I am rooting that definitely everybody should give it a try. See folks, see, whatever new comes to the market, give it a try. That's the best way, okay? And if Shalendra is giving it free, then why not, right? 1 month is a great time to give it a try, right?
Right, right, right. That makes sense.
Yeah,
Thanks for that, Siddharth. So,
yeah,
and thanks for explaining the problem statement really well. So, before Ushanshu explains how hypertest can be set up, I'll just give you a quick preview on what does it do, and why does it eliminate the need to write or manage test data, or even create test environment. So, what we've done with hypertest is, I think you've explained well as to why shift left is important. So we've built an approach in which all the user flows, real user flows that an application supports, can be recorded through agent that we've built, like an SDK. And these user flows actually contain real data, the data that your application supports. You gave an example of an e-commerce website where you want to fetch an item. So you said that it makes more sense to test that flow with the data of your user, or the data that your application actually supports, rather than working with randomly generated data. So on the same principle, or in the same line, hypertest enables teams to do that by recording these user flows from any environment, whether your local machine, a stage or test environment, even the live environment like the production data or the production environment. And whatever it records becomes the test data. And then these tests, as we call it, regression test or integration test, they focus mostly on the backend. To be honest, they focus on your code, your APIs, your data layer, which means it can test your database interactions, as well as your async operations if you're sending out any messages to your queues. But all of this gets recorded from whichever environment you record from. And then whenever a dev has made a change to that specific service for which it has recorded these flows, these tests can be run again, which is called as replay. So it's a very first principles approach, similar to what you've heard from record and replay tools. So it records and replays. The only difference between us and any other record and replay tool is that it is 100% autonomous. So everything that it records from, it can record from any environment, and it can figure out automatically which of these flows are duplicate, which of them are unique. That's the first thing. And second, unlike other record and replay tools, when you run these tests, and Ushnanshu is going to show that, it asserts all the important rules or all important validations automatically. So it can assert whether the response of your service or response of your API has regressed or not. It can assert whether you're making the right database calls to your database, or if you're sending the right, say, messages to your message queues. So the net idea is that with an approach that we've built, you can build, end-to-end integration style test to test your backend completely autonomously from any environment, whether production, local, or stage. And you can run them in even locally, which is the best thing, because which means that you don't have to create or manage any dedicated test environments. And the data that we capture when we record these flows is the test data that we can reuse when we run these tests. So that's the basic idea. I don't want to take it any long, explain it anymore. And Ushtanshu, can probably explain how this is set up in the next 3 minutes. And I think then we
Yeah.
can, open it for questions.
Sure. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen. Give me a minute. Yeah, my screen is visible, right? My screen is visible to you guys?
Yeah, it is. It is. It is.
Yeah.
It is visible. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run down the basic steps of how you basically, add hypertext to your service. So first things first is you basically get access to our dashboard, which is pretty easy. We have SSO now, where you can easily get access. If you are basically authorized via Google or via GitHub, you can log in via SSO. Then you first of all create a service into our dashboard. So just go here and click on add new service, which basically allows you to add a new service here. I already have a service added just before this particular demo. So this is the service that I have. So yeah, the next thing, we go to the source code to add hypertest. So a bit of a context here. This is a KYC application for a bank. It basically does standard KYC stuff like, onboarding a user, providing some compliances. The user is able to add a bank account and then do a basic credit transaction. It's using a PG database as a backend, and it's basically running locally on my machine. So adding hypertext on this is a very simple process. You just need to go ahead and initialize the SDK here. So I already have added SDK, but you just need to copy it from our public documentation, add the SDK. So a couple of things. Hypertext is based on a principle of an APM. Just like an APM would be, just like an APM is initialized, it's just initialized like that. You just add a piece of code here. And what happens is that it starts gathering telemetry data. So that's the one thing I wanted to add. Another thing is that you need to add some dependencies and stuff. So we basically provide you with some dependencies here, like our node dependency, our CLI dependency. Our node dependency is basically for you to be able to record your request, your traffic. And our CLI is the place where you basically have, via hypertext CLI, you basically rerun those tests on the replay mode, which Shailendra was talking about. And then last but not the least, you need to add a config file. Basically, this config file here, I'm just going to show you an example. So this config file is basically for you to basically identify what type of request you want to capture. You need to provide your candidate URL wherever your application is running that local host, basically the start command, the name of the basically the name of the file that you're running, etc. So all of these things are present in our documentation. So once this is done, basically go ahead and initialize hypertest where you want to run this. Give me a minute. I'm just gonna.
I just sort of put in a rider here. So once hypertest is set up on your service, you can make it to record from any environment. And this is already configured. So you can make it record from your local machine. You can make it record from your production environment, or even a stage or testing environment. The idea is that after hypertest is set up on your service, as and when your service is deployed in that environment, hypertest starts recording the traffic automatically in the background and start building tests, which we will later show. So I think Ushnanshu would just, so Ushnanshu is probably recording this from his local machine just for simplicity. And I think him starting the service will activate a record mode and start recording those flows. Go ahead.
Yeah. So once I've added the dependencies, I've added the conf file and just added my this piece of line of code here, which basically initializes the SDK. So once I've done that, I just need to install hypertest and it will get installed. I'm just gonna wait for a minute here. See, it's a very simple process to add hypertest to your service. now what will happen is that I'll run hypertest in something called record mode. I'm sure Shailendra just mentioned what record mode is. Record mode is basically when you run your application and it starts hypertest starts recording all the requests that are basically coming into your service, or the outbound call it's making to any third-party services, and captures its response. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run the application, and then we're going to see what happens. Give me a minute. Yeah. So my application is basically running. Hypertest is running in record mode now. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce some basic traffic in it. So I do not have a front end for this application. I do not have a UI. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trigger some APIs via Postman. So basically the whole user flow for this application is a user tries to onboard himself. So I'm going to simulate that. So this is a user Monty who tried to, give me a minute.
Yeah, Shranshu is trying to onboard his brother, Monty.
Yeah. Yeah. So now Monty is added. Now Monty needs some compliances to be able to add bank account. So I'm just going to provide that, and then basically create an account here. And now this is very important. So see, I already created a bank account with some, I would say, rudimentary amount of $10,000. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a credit transaction here, and this will be successful. So what will happen is Hypertest has captured this. I'm going to go back to my UI, to the dashboard. So what Hypertest has done, it has captured all of these requests. Just give it a minute. Yeah.
So by the time I think
what happens
is it ready?
Yeah, it's just taking some time.
No problem. So I think by the time he gets this ready, I think as he explained, these user flows of traffic can be recorded when your actual users, use your application through a legitimate UI. You don't have that one, so I think just for demonstration, we've showed this being done through a Postman collection. But like, assume you have several thousand users who are using your application in different ways, as your application is live. So this SDK, which is sitting at the back, has the capability to look at all those flows that your application actually supports, record them. But the good thing, in fact, the intelligence, the AI in the tool is that it will figure out which are those unique flows in your application, which add to the maximum coverage to your service. For example, if there are 10,000 people who are trying to create themselves as a new user, it will record all those flows and it will essentially put in to create user flow. It will deduplicate 9,999 of them and record or make one of that flow available for testing. So the idea is that the intelligence at the back figures out, first of all, ingest all the traffic that your application gives it to the service, and then from there it figures out which of these flows can be deduplicated and makes a list of these unique flows. Go ahead, Rishman.
Yeah. So now, as you can see from the screen, we have successfully captured the traffic, as Shailendra was just mentioning. So what we have done is we have captured the whole workflow of this application, right from when user was trying to onboard himself, which I basically simulated, to basically providing some compliances and then doing a transaction. So so I'm just going to open one of them and explain as to what all we capture when we say we capture your traffic from your service. I just want to explain what exactly is it we are capturing. So I'm just going to open one of them. So as you can see, this onboard user endpoint that basically has been utilized by the user to try to onboard himself. So what we are capturing is the whole payload of the application, right from this simulated request where this user, which is my brother Monty, tried to basically onboard himself, and along with its headers, with its total payload. Then this is the response of this request. So this response says that they were able to, basically add themselves into into this application, and basically they got assigned a customer ID, and then all the outbound calls is trying to basically make in order to get themselves added. So if you remember, I mentioned that I'm using a PG database as a backend. So this application is currently making 2 outbound calls to the PG database in order to add this particular user. So the first call is to basically check whether the user exists or not via the mobile number. So if you remember, when I tried the first time, it said that mobile number already exists and it didn't let me. So I had to change the mobile number then, and when I was trying to add Monty. So I basically did a select command to check whether this user is already there or not. And since it was not there with this mobile number, it basically inserted this user via this insert command along with its response. So in a nutshell, what it has captured actually is the original request, the payload of the request, its response, the response of the request that it's getting, the outbound call that the this particular, I would say, application makes to any third-party application like a database, or it can be a messaging queue as well. It can be a caching application like your Redis, and the response of the outbound call. So this is what it means when we say we capture traffic. So anything to add, Shailendra, in this?
No, I think this is summed up really well. And
Yeah.
basically, what Shanshu has shown is that your application would have both the negative and positive flows. So I think the
Yeah.
first API call was basically a negative flow where an existing user was trying to register as a new user and the application did not let him
Exactly.
register. I'm sure that kind of a flow would already be part of your traffic, so that got captured. And the second was more like a positive flow, which got captured therein. The point of showing
Yeah.
this is that your traffic is rich with all different flows that your application can support. Having something
Yeah.
like Hypertest can give you the assurance that every possible flow that needs to be tested is captured and available to test. And in the next maybe 2 minutes, he will explain how this flow that he has captured can now be tested. Go ahead.
Yeah. So what I'm gonna do here is, Shailendra, that I'm
Yeah,
gonna
Ushanshu,
introduce
can
a.
you? Yeah, just a minute. So, Ushanshu, can you keep it a little bit like in a more easier term for the folks to understand? Means like for maybe
Okay.
those people are first time using it. So, put it in a term like, let I have a service A, then I'm making a call, right? I'm you putting my SDK in
Okay.
service A. Service A may be calling DB service like a service B or
Ah,
service C.
got it.
So, in that it would be more relative for
Okay.
folks to understand.
Okay, got it. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna quickly summarize this in a way that you just mentioned. So what I did was I'm just gonna quickly summarize that this is my application here. This is a very simple banking application. Like all of you must be using Paytm or PhonePe or something. So basically, what you do is you first create your own account, then you basically uh, provide some compliances like, let's say, your Aadhaar details or some other social security thing that you always do. Then you basically create your bank account or add your bank account there, and then you start doing a transaction. So that's the thing I did. But with this application, this is what's happening is it's using a database as the backend, which happens in most of the applications, right? So what this application is doing, it's interacting with a PG database in the backend. And what I did here is that I had to simulate the traffic, right? So to simulate the traffic, I do not have a UI. So I used the PG database, and I used Postman, and basically a collection in the Postman to fire some traffic. Basically, I onboarded a user, provided some compliances, added a bank account, and did a credit transaction. So this is what I did, and it's interacting with the PG database in the backend. And these are the requests that I basically made. You can see in the CLI version as well as in the UI itself. So
So
this is
in a practical term, Ushanshu, so let assume I don't have a Postman collection, right? Because if I
okay.
will use SDK, then I would want to not go and write again the manual test cases, right? So basically, when the
Yeah,
original calls will happen, then automatically it will pick from that. So Postman is
yeah,
just for the
yeah,
demo purpose, nothing
yeah, yeah,
related. Anybody
yeah.
need to put effort. Yeah. So let me wrap up in a very simple sentence for folks. So let assume I have a service A, folks, right? And let assume that service is basically fetching data of COVID numbers from different state. Let assume, right? That data will be stored in a DB, right? And it may call another services meanwhile. Correct me, Ushanshu and Shalendra, if I'm going wrong here. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm trying to put it in the most simplest way. Okay, so now if I want to test this service A, what I will do, I will write functional API test, right? Maybe send a JSON for get method, which will provide a state name and a pin code, and it will fetch the number of COVID patients from that particular area by calling it from the DB. Now you tell me that, Siddharth, why I will what then how this is going to help me. So you don't have to write those test cases, right?
Yeah.
What it will do, the agent will go and sit with a service A. If you have anytime work with J profiler folks, you may make a little bit of sense, but let's assume that agent is somebody who is sitting with service A and looking into the traffic, means what calls people are making to service A. So let's assume I hit with service A, city Pune, pin code 411057. It will fetch the data and give. So service A will look into this thing. Okay, now at
Yeah.
the end of the day, what it will do, it will go through all the calls that has been made and create scenarios out of it. You are getting the point,
Yeah.
right? So instead of our scenarios are more imaginary, your scenarios will be more realistic
Yeah.
in a very
Yeah.
simplest term. Okay, rest of the things which Ushanshu has shared, if you are not able to relate, no harm in it. Okay, you can talk to Shailendra and Ushanshu after the call. The contacts will
Yeah.
be provided with you folks. I have given a simpler doc also, and means hypertest team is going to drop an email to all the folks, right? Go through that email. If you face any problem, you can reach out to their team. They will help you to set it up. Okay, and if you need help, definitely you can reach out to me on LinkedIn too, right? So that if you feel like, okay, a little bit some sections I'm unable to understand, I would suggest go to the hypertest team. But still, if you want a more simpler touch, do let me know. Okay, folks, I hope that is a summary, right, Shalendra and Ushanshu,
Yeah.
which we are trying to
Yeah,
convey.
that works. That works. We were
Awesome.
also thinking that we
That works. That's
actually
perfectly summarized.
we change the code a little of the banking app or the app that we are
Yeah.
showing a demonstration on and run this test that we just recorded and then catch an actual problem
Yeah.
that the attendees would be
Correct.
really interested in. Yeah. Okay.
Correct. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
And folks, you guys can
Yeah.
also
And just
install
to
this
add,
one and
yeah.
do give it a try of from your end. Okay, then only you will realize, okay, how basically it works, right? And if you don't have a service also, if you
Yeah.
don't know that, okay, I cannot put it on my own real services because that may be a compliant issue or something, no worries. They have a very nice service. You can just install it on your machine, simple lightweight service, and give it a try from your end how it is basically capturing those information. Okay, yeah, Ushanshu.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. So just ahead, like just to clarify, just use Postman just to simulate the real-time traffic. You can basically, if you basically put it in some sort of a QA environment or dev environment, it would automatically read traffic from it. So just wanted to mention that. And now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna stop this recording because we have already recorded our request. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna introduce a live bug into my application. So if you remember this whole workflow, you can see that the last part of this flow was me adding some sort of a transaction, a credit. I'm just doing a credit transaction where I have a bank account with a balance of $10,000 and I'm adding $500. So this is a credit transaction that I'm doing. I'm sure all of you who must have used some sort of a payments app might have done that in your life. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce a bug deliberately where I'm going to basically, instead of doing a credit, this application is going to do a debit now. So this is basically added. So what it's going to do is instead of crediting an amount, it's just going to debit the amount. And now I'm going to run the test again. So this is the replay mode that Shailendra was talking about. So what happens here is that these requests are run again. Now this time it will show you here that one of the requests that we have, basically one of the test cases we created, have failed now. And why they have failed, we're just going to go to the dashboard and just see for ourselves. So in the dashboard, as you can see, this is just the test that we ran just now. So I'm going to go here in the total request. So as you can see, one of the requests have failed, and we are just going to come to that. So what happens in replay mode, I'm just going to put it out in a very layman's term. So in record mode, what we are doing, we are just recording the whole traffic. We are recording all the requests, and we are creating test cases out of it. All right, that's I would say in the layperson's language, that what we are doing. And what happens is that we capture and basically create these test cases. And in replay mode, these test cases are run again. Now what happens this time, we basically draw a regression report of sorts where we show the expected response. This was the response that we got earlier in the record mode, and we compare it to the new response that we are getting. This is the response after we have made the change in the code. And as you can see, this is in this example, what was earlier happening was that in the old balance, we were crediting an amount of $500. All right, and this becomes the new balance, which becomes $10,500. But after I introduced the bug and I replayed this request again, so what it's showing that this application is now behaving differently. Instead of doing a credit, now it's doing a debit. Instead of adding $500, it's basically subtracting it. So this is what it's showing in this particular scenario. And what you can also see from here is that outbound call, which actually led to this particular, I would say, error, which basically shows you that earlier it was able to add $500, this particular update query, which was happening in the backend to the PG database to add $500 to the old balance. It was adding $500. Now it's doing a debit instead of doing a credit. So this, I would say, in a nutshell, is what Hypertest is about. Hypertest actually tells you what's your application's behavior. It basically establishes a baseline response of your application in record mode. And what happens when you replay those requests again, the baseline response established earlier is basically compared to the actual response, which is basically, which the actual response of the actual outcome. And a regression report is drawn where it shows the differences in the application's behavior before and after your developer made a code change. So couple of things here. Since we are doing, basically we are reading from applications traffic, there is absolutely no need to provide any assertions of business logic, because again, as you can see, we basically went ahead and captured the whole workflow of your application. We went ahead and basically captured how your application behaves internally with externally with all the third-party applications and such. There is no need to provide any test data. There is no need to establish a separate environment. You can run these tests locally as well. And last but not the least, there is no need to mock any external third-party dependencies which your service might be interacting with. So I would say, in the previous example that Sidharth just mentioned, he mentioned about some COVID app. So if your COVID app is basically, let's say, interacting with the database in the backend, and when you basically go ahead and write a test, you sometimes need to mock that database on your end. You have to manually mock the database using some sort of a framework or anything. But with Hypertest, you do not need to do that. We automatically mock the behavior of the database as well. So, Shailendra, do you want to add anything in this?
I think this is good.
One point. Yeah, I just want to add one point. So the last section which Ushanshu has told, like how the mocking part works. Let's assume our COVID app is talking to some government data, right? Specifically in which hospital, how many patients are added, right? How many patients are hospitalized. And government is saying that, look, man, I'm not going to keep my data open to you. So usually in that case, or maybe due to some reason we are unable to access, we mock it, right? So that we will make sure that our end-to-end flow works. In this case, you don't have to mock it.
Yeah.
Right. So the Hypertest will automatically make the job over there, or else we need to go through Mockito and all those things, right? Wire mock those services.
Yeah.
Makes sense,
So,
right, folks?
Yeah. So essentially, the mission statement becomes like you go ahead and add it as an SDK on your top of your application. It just sits there, and by the virtue of sitting there, it records the traffic. It establishes how your application actually behaves. Let's say an example of the COVID application, it establishes how that COVID application behaves. It's all of its, I would say, external applications like maybe a Redis is there for caching, maybe a backend database like PG is there for maintaining some data. Maybe it's interacting with some Mongo queries as well. So establishes all the dependencies, everything. It generates tests like this. And as soon as your developer makes a change, you rerun these tests and just go ahead and find out what was different this time. Like if there is any regression in your code, if there is any regression in the way your application is behaving. And once you rerun this test and you find any regression, you go ahead and fix that change, maybe fix that regression, fix that deviation in your code. And yeah, that's the basic idea behind running the Hypertest.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I think this could be a good time we can take questions in case Sidharth, you want to conclude, and maybe in case people would have questions. We have like 40 people live at the moment.
Yeah, folks, if you have any question, you can ask. Okay.
Okay, I think so. I think our good friend has popped up the first question. How do we do a cleanup on the environment? Okay, so I think I'll just take that with your permission, Sidharth. So basically, let me be straight here. You're essentially recording from an environment and you're replaying it even locally. So whatever traffic your environment supports or has, we will automatically record. So you don't have to do any cleanup of any sorts. We at the end provide a code coverage report, which essentially helps you triangulate what scenarios, what parts of your code got actually covered with that traffic. So to answer your question, Ayush, you don't have to even worry about cleaning up any environment. Expose Hypertest to record from that environment and it will build test automatically. I
Okay,
hope that
I have
helps.
one question from my end. For sorry, I should have asked in the afternoon call. So let
Sure.
us. Do I need to always if I save change? Do I need to always go run it manually, or we can integrate it into some pipeline or something?
Yeah, you can run it. You can integrate with a pipeline when you want to run the test.
Hmm.
As in when for the record mode, as in when your
Hmm.
application is deployed in that environment, it automatically
Hmm.
starts building these tests. But you want to run them, like for example, you
Hmm.
want to test your PR before you
Hmm.
decide to merge in your
Hmm.
release branch, right? And I'm
Hmm.
assuming you're going to test your PR in a CI pipeline. So you can
Hmm.
integrate Hypertest in a CI pipeline. So whenever a PR is created, your
Hmm.
CI pipeline would call Hypertest, will run these tests, and based on the reports, you can decide to merge
So
or
do we have a demo or doc somewhere it is written how to integrate with Jenkins or something, CI/CD
yeah,
pipelines?
yeah, absolutely,
Okay,
absolutely.
awesome,
So
awesome,
people who
awesome.
decide to set up can do this.
Yeah. Okay,
There's
cool.
another question. Yeah. Okay, so the question is the functional flow of API or UI actions of positive or negative
Good one.
flow. How Hypertest is useful to capture the test cases and bugs. Can you explain more about this? So that's a great question. I think it's sent by Susi Kumar. So essentially, Susi Kumar. So your application traffic is full of all kinds of flows, right? Negative, positive, edge cases, uh, you know, uh, uh, popular cases, so on and so forth. What we are doing is that we are just building a test. We are recording all these scenarios and building a test from all these cases. That's what we are doing. What we are, as I explained in the answer to my last question, since we give you a code coverage report, we will tell you specifically whether we have covered or tested a negative flow and a positive flow. So your code would be written in a way, for example, if a user who's an existing user tries to register, you would throw a 400, right? Your application would throw a 400. So if that negative flow is captured and tested by Hypertest, we will show in your coverage report that that line that is responsible to throw a 400 for to an user who's an existing user is trying to register, that is being tested and covered. So that way, everything that your application traffic supports will be tested. And these are real scenarios, by the way, as Sidharth said. So you would have the added confidence that whatever my actual flows or steps my application supports or is possible is getting tested every time. You don't have to worry about thinking about different scenarios, sitting down, putting them in an Excel, and then populating test data around it. All the flows that your application supports is picked up from your traffic, and the captured data becomes your test data.
Bugs part, I guess I don't think so. Bug definitely a QA need to go through the failed test case and then he need to figure out
Yes,
that it is a bug or not. So bug
right,
call is definitely on. So that's still on the QA's end. Okay, folks.
right. You can decide if it's a bug or not, and you can push it to
Hmm.
Jenkins if you want, like Jira.
Hmm.
I'm sorry, if you want to push it to Jira and create a bug report, and you can tag it as a bug. You can automate. So we have like a we have
Jira integration.
integration with Jira integration, so we can push it that way.
Yeah.
Vishal has a question: how to ensure that doesn't create any compliance issue in a company? Yeah, that's a great question. In fact, so basically, we work with a lot of financial services and fintech companies. I'm assuming this kind of question has that kind of a background. So Hypertest is available as a completely self-hosted solution, which essentially means that whatever data we record when you look at your traffic never leaves your cloud. So you can self-host or self-deploy Hypertest, the platform that has all the intelligence in your cloud, make it work to build tests from any environment, and all the data that we record will always remain in your environment. And you can switch off internet in that specific VPC or VM on which you've set up Hypertest, and it will still work. So
Okay, so
we
I am
take
adding
good care
one
of
more
it.
point over here, Shalendra. Uh, so,
Sure.
uh, so what? How basically it works? Let assume I have a service in my organization, right? So when my SDK runs, it's not like SDK will fetch your data and put it in a cloud which is owned by Hypertest. You can
Yes.
tell SDK that look, man, whatever data you are fetching, put it in my S3. So S3 is our, let assume my S3 storage service, right? So
Absolutely.
it will store in your AWS account ID S3 storage service. So Hypertest is not at all related to that, right?
Absolutely.
So
You
that's how
explained
you
it
need
much
to
better
make
than
sure.
me. Yeah, you explained much better than
Because
me.
I
Yeah,
have dealt with
absolutely.
this kind of issues a lot.
Right, right, right. Next question is by Uday Kumar. Quickly, will it be able to collect data for complex payloads and responses with tons of objects and arrays with different MB sizes? This is a good way of collecting data. Yeah, I think so. I think that's the gist of the question is: would it be able to record complex flows where you would have to record, say, really large and complex payloads? Uday, it will be able to do that perfectly well. In fact, it is being designed in a way that if your application your APIs are designed in that way that the payload sizes for both response and request are really large, it will not add any extra latency when it is recording all that, and when it tests all of this, it will be able to produce. It will so for example, it will be able to run close to about 1,000 tests in less than 5 minutes. So I think if you're worried that because your payload sizes are larger and when you run your own functional API test, it takes a lot of time for these tests to complete, even if they run parallelly. In our case, you wouldn't have to do parallelization if you that's always possible. But since we mock, external systems really smartly, even with applications or APIs with heavy payloads, these tests would complete really fast. So take this as a hook: 1,000 tests in 5 minutes. Another question by Ritesh is: can we modify test data and record a test case? Yeah, absolutely. Although you would not need to. A simple reason for that is that we are recording everything and anything that your application supports. And say we have recorded a create user flow, but we have not recorded a negative flow or a negative scenario around creating a user. All that we'll do is we'll highlight that in your code coverage report. You can go out and play with your application with the negative flow once. We'll record it and make it part of it. But if you want to modify test data, you're always free to do that. 99.9% of the cases you would not feel the need to.
Yeah. Because see folks, if you again go and need to change the test data, I think the
Right,
credibility will be reduced because you need to go through a huge amount of data, right? And the complex
right.
part question, folks, I want to add one thing. There are a lot of complex JSONs I have seen, right? Those nested JSONs, right? Where we need to put a lot of effort to write the Pojo or models while automating
Mm.
this. This is a huge save of time. Though I have not tried with the complexation yet, okay, for the hypertest. I will give it a try and try to share, okay, how it works, how fast it
Yeah,
runs.
absolutely. Adding to that, Siddharth, I think this is one of the
Yeah.
biggest problems that people
Mm.
complain about is that
Yep.
they have to, become really creative in not only generating or seeding test data, and then the management of that data becomes an added overhead itself.
Yep.
So the only way to, tackle that problem is eliminate it completely. Don't even
Mm.
worry about test data. And though we feel that this approach, where you can reuse data that we capture from the environment that we record tests from, is the best approach.
Makes
I
sense, right?
think.
Does it support
Oh, I
visual
think.
testing? No.
No,
Visual
not at the
testing,
moment.
not.
It does not. It does not. It does not. It supports only your backend layer, your code, your
Yep.
APIs, your data layer, and your async operations. You have any
And I
more
guess
questions?
microservice architecture, those folks who are in microservice architecture, you should try this. Okay, microservice event driven, SOA, those are pretty good. Monolith, I don't see it much useful. But I guess
So in
microservice is
monoliths,
a
you're right. You're right. I think in monoliths,
mono,
basically, what you can do is you can test your database operations. So whether you are
yeah.
updating or
Mm,
fetching the right data from your database,
mm,
whether your queries are sanitized, you can do
mm,
that in case of monoliths and any other application. You're right. For applications which are service
mm.
for architecture that's service oriented, you can check inter-service contracts.
Yes. A microservice is a must. Event driven is a must. Okay. What I can see.
Right.
SOA is a very good use case. Monolith, maybe the ROI would not be that much. So, folks, and I know most of us are in microservice, right? I guess 80
Right.
to
Right.
90% folks are in microservice.
That's
Monolith,
right.
yeah. I will try to write a post, folks, okay, if possible, like in which architecture. And if you guys try, then do share with me, okay? We can see
Makes sense.
how we can create different use cases around different architecture. Hey, yeah, hey,
So
hi,
Bharat.
Bharat. I will take the Bharat question.
Okay.
Okay.
I think I think your screen froze. I think probably you lost internet.
I don't think so. It will do.
Okay, I think
Yeah. So my battery is dying.
so. Yeah, I think Bharat, it will.
You have
So I think I just lost
directly
your.
do your root cause analysis.
So it will. So basically, the way it will do a root cause analysis is that it will essentially tell you. So when Hypertest runs, right, it reports errors because of a change that you've done in your service. So basically, what we do is that we do a git diff. We do a quick git diff between the build that you're testing and your master branch, and then show you those tests or then show you failures across those scenarios which are affected because of that change. So to answer your question, Bharat, once you start using Hypertest, your developers or whoever is using it would be able to pinpoint exactly what exact change in your code is making these flows to fail. So if you think that is a root cause analysis or that's a way to debug your code better, we can give you that insight. So we'll tell you, we know what is the difference between or what is the change in code between your new build and your master, and we know which of these scenarios are failing. We'll tell you which change has caused this failure. So yeah, we'll be able to do that once you start using it. And in fact, great question, Bharat. Quick answer, Ankesh, yes. Can this be integrated with Jenkins? It can absolutely be integrated with Jenkins or any other CI tool, Circle CI, take your pick and you'd be able to use Hypertest. Does Hypertest provide the necessary recovery mechanisms to resume the end-to-end flow? Okay, okay, all right. So basically, we will give you a complete trace. So I think this question is mostly coming from a perspective where teams actually end up using, or from the perspective of end-to-end testing, which involves the UI, because that's where you would like to stop and then resume the action thereof. In our case, when something fails, we've run the test in its entirety, or we've actually executed the request in its entirety. So you don't have to in any way resume. That is how your application failed in the context of that request or that flow. So you wouldn't have to resume from any step. All that you can do is once you've been reported a problem, go back and try to trace what part of the code was responsible for it. So a quick answer to that is that we've eliminated the need to stop and resume, because we run test, or we give you a sense of the failure from an end-to-end perspective. Everything was run without. So we've eliminated the need to have dependencies, right? So we don't need a real database. We don't need an actual service to like a downstream service to be able to test the interaction between this service and the other. So you don't have to actually pause and resume again. That's a quick answer, Bharat. Any more questions? I think we're probably done with it. I think it was a fairly long session, but given the number of questions you were asked, it seems that we've actually hit a raw nerve. This is kind of problem that everybody struggles with in their teams and respective organization,
And
right?
folks,
Siddharth?
don't hesitate to, yeah, what we can do, I am sharing a Google Drive link, okay? Folks, you go and put your questions in the over there, okay? Because some people may watch the video again and then they come up with doubts. So definitely this doc will be there, okay? Folks, so if you have any questions,
Yeah.
just
So
put
what?
your
Yeah. Absolutely. So I think I'll just sorry for cutting you, Siddharth. So basically, what we'll do after the session is that we will send everybody a quick 5-step guide to get started with Hypertest and the problem that Sidharth just explained. So anybody who's interested can use that guide to get started. And as Sidharth promised at the start of the call, anybody who wants to try this internally in their organizations, get a 30-day free trial. And we are okay extending it because we love the folks that were able to make it, all because of Sidharth. So you get a how to set up guide after the end of this call, and you essentially can set it up for a free trial in your organizations for a 30-day free trial. In case you want to try something locally, let us know. We can give you the banking app that we showed the demo on that you can install on your local machine and can try, record, and replay. in case you want to have that confidence before you push it to your teams. I hope that works for everybody. Okay, I think we are done with the questions and the conclusions. Have any last thoughts that you have, and we can probably conclude the session.
Yeah, so just give me a minute. I am kind of setting. My laptop is running out of charge. Okay, thanks
No
again,
problem.
folks. I can see there are a lot of folks whom I know them from LinkedIn. Thank you again, folks, for joining this one. Okay, whatever I do, whenever I do something, I always try to add value, because I know after completing your office, putting your effort to a webinar is tough, right? And you always shown me that faith that, okay, if I am there, then I definitely add some value, right? So I hope it has added value. After this also, if you want to need any help from Hypertest, you can reach out to Shailendra, you can reach out to Shanshu, right? They are going to help you. If you have any queries on shift left or anything, you can reach out to me directly on LinkedIn or on, I have sent my link also over there. So yep, pretty much sorted, right, folks?
Yeah, thanks for this.
Give it a try,
As a
right, folks? I
yeah.
suggest give it a try. Okay, don't hesitate to try new things, right? It's not like what tools we are using. It's like how you should know, right, how the Hypertest is taking that approach, right? Because maybe tomorrow somebody else, maybe Selenium REST Studio, somebody is going to do the same way, or maybe Hypertest will try to give us more features, because the more we use, the more we give the feedbacks, they will enhance it, right? So it's always to try, right, the new things. When it is free, definitely yes, I keep on trying every time. And that actually helps us to learn more things, right? How people think, how Shailendra has come up with this idea, right? And I guess folks, if you want to really implement in your project, set up a call with Shailendra. I guess Shailendra won't mind for that, right? He will explain you, right, what was the problem statement, how it hit his mind to come up with this solution. Talk to these folks, okay? Always, I usually love to talk to these folks, because it gives us a different kind of mindset, right, to think about the problem statements.
That makes complete sense. And just to give you guys a bit of background, I was VP engineering at Oyo before I started Hypertest, and I sort of face this problem day in, day out, with my developers as well as my test teams complaining to me about these two issues, having to maintain a stable environment and then this effort of managing test data. So this is a real problem. Everybody is trying to solve that, and we are very, very open for feedback. We would love your feedback. These are the right kind of folks who can give us back feedback. A good way to engage with us is to book a quick call. After the session, we'll send out an email to everybody with the recording as well as that small guide. And if you think you want to try this out, you are just one click away from booking a call with us and getting started. Okay, all right. So I'll conclude the call. Thanks, Sidharth, for taking our time and organizing this call. Thanks for everybody who attended. I hope we can organize more such webinars in future and can keep the entire community motivated and excited. All right. Thank you. Thanks a lot.